When the Russians first rolled into Ukraine, how long do you think they thought it was going to take to achieve whatever military goal they were hoping to achieve? And maybe you can even answer the question, what military goal were they hoping to achieve when they invaded Ukraine? Because I don't think they thought
Yeah.
we were going to take it lying down.
Yeah, I think you can now say or at least I can say with some amount of confidence that the initial objective when Russia entered was that they thought it was a big, huge show of force that would cause the Ukrainian government to coalesce and to give in and just do what he asked, make the negotiations that he wanted. Similar to what happened in Hungary in 1956, where they rolled in with a bunch of tanks into Budapest and there was relatively small violence. The government capitulated and did what he asked to do, and I think that's what he thought was going to happen. Instead, he got the worst case scenario was that the Ukraine side not only didn't give up, but turned into fierce fighters, and Putin did not have enough troops to do that, to handle that kind of a big fight. And so he made a huge strategic blunder in sending too few troops in for handle the worst case scenario. But the problem is that was still a robust number, and now he can't back down. So it took almost a year and a half to get a force size enough to actually be able to conquer territory of the nature that he wanted, and now that's where he's at. I will say that Biden said during that debate the other night that what a lot of people say was that, oh, they thought they were going to capture Kyiv in 5 days, and they failed. No, they never thought they would capture the city with only about 50,000 troops that were assigned to that portion of the fight. So that was never their intention. But they did expect the Ukraine side to give up, and that was a pretty big blunder.
It was, but I want to ask you about the idea that the government would capitulate. Didn't we offer Zelensky a flight out when he said, "No, no, I don't want I don't want an airplane lift out of here. I want arms and weapons." I mean, that was almost a defining moment when he drew a line in the sand and said, "We're going to fight this."
It was, but that was late. That was like right before the thing happened. And you may recall that was after the U.S. and most every other Western country had moved their diplomats out of Kiev with the expectation that things were going to go south. And they thought that Zelensky would follow suit because that seemed like the rational thing to do.
Yeah.
And instead, just everything got turned upside down, and it was led by Zelensky, his unwillingness to capitulate.
All right. Well, we know the fog of war. I always, it's not a joke, but it is kind of it's a little difficult getting a handle on who's winning, who's losing, how many lives have been lost in this meat grinder that apparently both sides have suffered tremendous casualties. I have no idea what the progress is on the ground. I know Russia isn't giving up, and of course, we keep sending weapons. We, among other nations, keep sending weapons to Ukraine, and now they got our longer range missiles, which are capable of being launched into Russia, and that require, from my understanding, American troops with military intelligence clearance to even operate. So this whole it's like Vietnam. We got advisors on the ground in Ukraine, and apparently operating up until the moment where the button is pushed, the weapons that are being launched at the Russians. I mean, we're precariously close to a head-on collision with Russia.
You got it pretty much spot on. That's exactly the case. The only thing I would fill in some gaps there is that the Russian side is definitely progressing westward, all along the line of the point of contact. They actually launched a limited incursion north of Kharkiv in May, I think it was. About the 1st of May, they moved 10 kilometers in, and then they started digging in trenches. The Ukraine side launched a lot of counterattacks attempts to push them back. That has turned into another bloody meat grinder, almost like Bakhmut, a similar situation. The line is not hardly moving up there, but lots of people keep dying. Meanwhile, because Ukraine has sent their reserves up there, they don't have as many troops on the main line of contact in the Eastern Front. And so Russia is starting to make methodical progress there. It does not appear that Ukraine has enough or will ever have enough men, especially trained men. So in my view, the die is cast. The Ukraine side can never win the war. They can't even make a stalemate. So eventually, in enough time, things are going to go bad, and they're going to probably end up losing. And that is an interesting thing. I don't know if you saw the news just this morning. Viktor Orban has just landed in Kiev and is talking to Zelensky to try and make a face-to-face appeal, according to what's reported already, to have an immediate ceasefire. So I think the others are starting to recognize this can't be won, and they want to try to limit the damage.
And the damage limited would be how much land, I suppose, they're willing to let the Russians have in return for negotiating a peace for the balance of the region.
That's 100% accurate. That's no longer a question of if, it's only how much. That's just the reality. It's the harsh truth of war. It doesn't matter who's, quote, right or wrong, which side you like, which side you hate. That's the realities that we have to deal with.
What is the long-term problem Russia, if any, that Russia faces in that situation? I mean, my understanding is Crimea, which they had already annexed back when Obama was president, that was filled with Russians who were, loyal or at least largely pro-Putin and pro-Russia. So you at least have a willing population, that partial segment of Ukraine. What of the balance? What of whatever land they end up acquiring in any negotiated peace settlement? Are they going to have like a guerrilla warfare situation on their hands where they got the land, but they're constantly under attack by the anti-Russian Ukrainians that still remain in the area?
Yeah, there is in the Donbass and those four provinces that the Russians are asking for, and what Putin specifically said that he wanted in a peace deal. Those are a significant majority of Russian speakers as well. That was actually part of the reason why the Luhansk and Donetsk provinces rebelled in the first place back in 2014, because they were almost all Russian speakers and ethnic Russians. And the further west you get, the lower that percentage gets. And so there are more percentage of non-Russian speakers in those provinces than there are right now in the Crimea, which is, I think, 90-something%. It's almost complete. But I think, though, that long term, certainly in the medium term, I think that it's likely that Russia will have to fight a lot of insurgency stuff, just because the anger and animosity and hatred of the Western Ukrainians is so great. And for a generation, I think that even though they don't think they're going to get the land back just to punish Russia, I think they'll be doing that. I imagine you'll see that for a long time to come.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you bite something off like this, you're going to have to deal with the aftermath. There's no question about it. What of your reaction to Trump's comments? I know he can be, a little windy at times, but he said straight out during the debate, I'll have the whole thing settled before I'm even sworn in. I mean, no flesh on the bones of that statement. Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
I have some idea. I think that the primary flow is that it's just a hyperbole that to communicate to the electorate, I'm going to end the war. I'm not going to follow the Biden path of continuing to expand it, and as long as it takes, and just keep going forever and potentially stumble into World War III, which he later in that same debate warned against. But yeah, I mean, he actually specifically said, I'll have it resolved before I take office, which obviously is not possible because he has no authority. Russia, interestingly, I think today even was asked about that, and they say, yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. Really what you just said. They go, we'll wait and see if he wins, and then if he wins, what he says, but we won't comment on it up to this point. But obviously, they would much rather have somebody who wants to talk about ending it than the one that wants to talk about keeping it going.
And going back to your tea leaf reading about where this is going to end up, which is some sort of negotiated settlement giving Russia some land. So it sounds to me like Donald Trump has already projected that message in his comments the other night.
100%. And listen, I know some of Trump's senior advisors in his campaign on the foreign policy, and that is exactly what he plans to do. He wants a ceasefire early on, and then he wants to work on a negotiated settlement to get the best deal he can for the Ukraine side. But he's sober-minded about it, and he knows that you're not going to get out without giving some land away.
Well, without enough warm bodies to fire and weapons systems in Ukraine, either they're going to have to import bodies from NATO countries or again, back to the writing on the wall.
And see, that's the irony in this, and what actually angers me about this from the beginning is because even if NATO countries unilaterally, not as the NATO bloc, but unilaterally said, we're going to send, 50,000, 250,000 NATO soldiers, well trained to fight for Ukraine as mercenaries, whatever category. Even if somehow that started succeeding, and I don't think it would, and I could explain that later. All you're going to do is get to where Putin's red line is to use nuclear weapons. So you cannot succeed either in driving Russia out, or if you've somehow started to drive them out, you would still lose, because then it's almost certain would cause nuclear war. And so the only rational path is to get a negotiated settlement and get this deal solved ASAP.